Don Cooney. I'm looking at you, Shannon. I'm looking at you, Aaron. I'm looking at you, Matt. I'm looking at you, Urban. I'm looking at you, Mayor Hopewell. Let's open that conversation. David Anderson, Commissioner. Let's open that conversation. We can do this. Let's have that dialogue. We are in this together, right? Let's have that conversation with our residents. Let's work this through with our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, please. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Paul Kreiner. I live at 112 Vine Street in Kalamazoo. Just a few quick notes. Just as a resident of Kalamazoo, I have, for the 20-plus years that I've lived here, purchased my water from Gordon Water. I will not drink fluoridated water. And I just want to share a quick note, and please ask you to research the same way I did. The World Health Organization, in a study over the past 40 years, the countries of the world that do fluoridate their water, is that the right word? And the ones that do not, there is no difference in the amount of tooth decay. It's all been decreasing over time, so putting fluoride in the water does not have any benefit. I strongly suggest that you not just table it, but vote it down. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wanting to address the side? Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Commissioners and Mayor. My name is Zachary Lassiter. I live in the city of Kalamazoo. I wanted to say something, and I was going to keep my mouth shut, but someone said something that really got under my skin. The first thing that got under my skin is we're comparing putting fluoride in our water to the Flint water crisis. What? That's obscene, obnoxious, and frankly just stupid. You're comparing fluoride to a public health emergency, which is now a federal disaster. I don't get that. That to me is obscene and riding on a disaster that is hurting countless people in Flint. The second thing that concerned me is someone who brought up and inferred that fluoride causes autism. I'm on the autism spectrum, and I'm getting sick of being used as everyone's little project. Let's stop vaccines, let's stop this, let's stop that because it's causing autism. No, it's been proven over and over. Many of those things don't cause autism. The journal that someone was speaking of, I believe they spoke of, The Lancet, that's the one journal that published something that was completely discredited and wrong that said vaccines cause autism. If you ask me, that's not a credible medical journal to knowingly publish stuff like that. And they've been hit with numerous other uncredible things that they knowingly published. This just disgusts me. We have so many bigger issues we need to be talking about. Fluoride has been approved by the FDA to be used in water. In fact, I just looked up on my phone, the FDA has said that you can use the claim that fluoridated water is good for the teeth. It was approved as being labeled that way for bottled water. I've looked on the CDC website. They encourage fluoridated water. I looked at the World Health Organization's website. They encourage it. The studies have been done, but they want more studies. What else can I say? Fluoride doesn't cause autism, and that just pisses me off, that claim.
Thank you, sir. Next, please. Okay, so again, I'm going to ask you not to respond to people. We got to respect everyone's opportunity here to state their feelings, please. Ma'am?
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Dr. Gillian Stoltman, and I'm the County Health Officer. I'm not a resident of the City of Kalamazoo, but I do drink City of Kalamazoo water and enjoy it. I will just lay out a few facts and my observations about fluoride in water as I understand them, looking at the literature, discussing with colleagues of mine who are much more knowledgeable than I am about the impact of fluoride on teeth. First of all, I'll just reiterate what the last speaker said, which is that the use of fluoride in water as a supplement is supported by many, many organizations, including the American Dental Association, the Michigan Dental Association, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, as well as non-governmental groups such as the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Family Physicians. And that's just in this country. It was mentioned that a number of countries, and in fact a number of water supplies, do not add fluoride to their drinking water. And that is primarily because they do not have to. Fluoride is often found naturally in groundwater, and where there are good levels of fluoride in the groundwater, there's no need to add additional fluoride to it. So yes, it's true. A large proportion of Western Europe does not add fluoride, but it's because they've got levels of fluoride in the drinking water already that they don't need to supplement them. Somebody mentioned Grand Rapids, and it was the place where fluoridation of municipal supplies first took place. And it was very quickly seen that the incidence of dental caries dropped significantly after they added fluoride to the water. Dental caries, fortunately, because of fluoridation, is nothing like as prevalent as it used to be, but it is still present, and we still see it primarily in very low-income individuals. And one of the benefits, one of the things that we do in public health, unlike medicine, is we don't look at the individual so much as we look at communities. And our actions are based upon doing the best for communities, for providing the environment in which a person can be healthy. And anyone who's had even a simple toothache knows how distracting that can be from your education, from your work. So to make sure that our children particularly do not suffer from dental caries is the reason that fluoride was put into the water. We know it protects against that. This means that our children are not subject to, as they used to be in decades gone past, of having to sit in class with very uncomfortable teeth, not being able to focus on their education. A number of studies were brought up, and it's true, those studies were published. But there have been a number of other studies that have refuted those. They've looked at the methodology, they looked at the statistical analysis, and found them to be lacking. Is there still need for conversation? There is always need for conversation. There's always new data that comes through, and it always needs to be looked at. But I would say that the preponderance of the evidence, the scientific evidence, is in favor of fluoridation, and that's why groups such as the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Dental Association are still very supportive of fluoridation of water. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else wanting to address this item? Seeing no one, commissioners requested actions, a motion to approve this item and authorize the city manager to sign all documents on behalf of the city. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Anderson,
Second.
supported by Commissioner Mozarek. Discussion, commissioners? Commissioner Anderson?
So it is the case that on any given topic, whether it be legal or scientific or environmental, it isn't a group of 7 people who are necessarily experts in that particular topic area that make that decision. So one of the responsibilities, I think, of being on this particular panel is to attempt to be the best generalist that you can be, because a lot of topics come in front of us, and I would also suggest that on many of those topics, whether it's the quality of an asphalt paving product or the structural integrity of a piece of steel that goes into some piece of equipment, we are going to be dependent on the recommendations, oftentimes, of people who are more expert in that category than we are. And so for better or worse, I think those of us sitting up here are in that situation on this particular topic. This is obviously not a brand new topic for the City Commission. This particular topic has been discussed multiple times for many, many years. And over the course of time, we've had a variety of people come and speak to us on this topic with not particular portfolio of expertise, but who have done their own research, as well as folks who are professionally involved in healthcare, like the director, Dr. Jillian Stoltman, of our county health department tonight. We've had folks here who were representing dental associations in the past. We've had representatives here from the Michigan Health Department. And I think any of us that are interested in this topic, which obviously is a topic that raises certain concerns, that are beyond concerns that may accrue from other topics, we also do some of our own work. So one thing that I do when I know this is coming up again is I look out at the literature to some extent, and I see that people who are respected, nationally respected, for example, like Dr. Murthy, who is our Surgeon General here in the United States, appointed by our President, came out with a perspective on this topic in his July-August 2015 fairly recent report, calling community water fluoridation one of the CDC's 10 great public health achievements of the 20th century. Possibly, inaccurate, may be colored by something or other. I'm hoping in this situation that Dr. Murthy is a credible, thoughtful, intelligent person who's looked at the broad view of this situation and based on that has made a recommendation. He goes on to say that 75% of all people in this country served by community water systems, about 210 million people, currently benefit from what he describes as this safe and effective intervention. In addition to that, the Department of Health and Human Services came out with a statement on June 8th of 2015. It was a statement on evidence supporting the safety and effectiveness of community water fluoridation. All these things are available in the public domain. A pretty significant statement describing their continuing monitoring of this issue and their opinion about its effectiveness. And that came out from Dr. Catherine Wino, I think I'm pronouncing her last name right, who's Director of the Division of Oral Health at the National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion from the CDC. In addition to that, there are articles available. Another one from the CDC is specifically about fluoridation of drinking water and corrosion of pipes and distribution systems fact sheet. That's publicly available also. And the information that's presented in this particular document really says that there is a negligible effect related to the addition of this form of fluoride to water related to corrosion, that there are many other factors that are involved, and as a matter of fact, it is the case that I guess those of us that drink water certainly want it to be clean, pure water. I happen to drink the water in Kalamazoo, and there are other things that we add to our water, anti-corrosion agents, chlorination, those sorts of things that have contributed to, generally speaking, water systems in the more developed part of the world being safe and healthy water systems that have contributed greatly to the health of everyone who benefits from it. So we got to this issue now, and we have here on the City Commission, we have a grouping of facts, we have recommendations from those in positions, hopefully to be, make responsible decisions about this particular topic. And in my opinion, for me, it is that I have to weigh those factors and make a decision based on that. And it's not, I'm not certain how this decision will be made with all of us here tonight, and there's certainly opportunity for more discussion. But I think that at this point, it seems that, from what I can understand, that the benefits, outweigh what may be, occurring in terms of the shortfalls in terms of what it could happen related to adding fluoride to the water. So it's, I'm not quite sure best how we move forward with a really informed discussion on this topic. It's complicated. We're certainly not going to get the Surgeon General here to speak to us, but it's something that we have to decide, I guess, all of us tonight, and based on that, I'm certainly, as people suggested, open to some ongoing discussion. How to accomplish that, I'm not sure, but for this evening, I will be in support of our continuing this practice here, and I'm certainly open to some suggestions about how, in some informed way, we could, continue to find ways to address the issue.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Urban?
Thank you, Mayor Hopewell. Well, I think we heard a lot of arguments against using fluoride in the water, having it being added against people's will and so forth. I found a lot of those statements, frankly, troubling. Not so much from their, well, I don't think we really heard a balanced discussion of the issue. My concern is, are we getting $112,000 worth of value from this addition of fluoride to the water? The city's budget situation is precarious, and I think that we need to be looking at what are we going to be doing to minimize our expenses, because sooner or later we're going to have to ask our taxpayers, either through increased property taxes or through pilots or taxation of nonprofits or an income tax, we're going to ask people to pay more. And before they're going to be willing to pay more, they're going to want to be sure that they're getting value for the money that they're already being taxed for. So given that we now have fluoride in toothpaste and fluoride in lots of products that wasn't present when fluoride was first introduced into the water systems of the cities in the nation in the 40s, one could claim that the protection is already there through that source. And so I'm getting close to the point of saying, let's submit this expense to the priority-based budgeting regimen that the city has adopted and see where it falls. If it's at the bottom of the list, and we're looking for ways to save money for the taxpayers in the city, maybe this is something that ought to go. But in terms of being afraid of the toxic effects of fluoride, I'm not buying that at all. I don't find that credible. But whether fluoride is the effects of decreased carries through fluoridation of the municipal water supply is worth $112,000 to the city of Kalamazoo, now that's an open question. So if I vote yes on this tonight, it's going to be with the understanding that if the city's finances aren't in considerably better shape in a year from now, and we don't have a plan moving forward to actually correct our budget imbalance, next year I may very well vote no. So I'm using this opportunity to say that I'm looking at everything more than I used to about how we spend our money and what we need to do to convince our citizens that they get value for their tax dollar. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Sykes?
Yeah. So a couple of things. Somebody said this evening that, you know, the citizens of Kalamazoo know what's best for them, and I agree with that. I have had the great fortune to have just done a lot of field work, knocked a lot of doors, talked to a lot of voters in our city very recently as a part of my campaign to get this seat. And the one thing that I always try to do is make sure that I am best representing folks in our entire community. Surprisingly, fluoride came up quite a bit on the doors because somebody, you know, a few folks had brought this issue up before. However, I think there are some folks in the room who would be surprised to find that the vast majority of voters that I've spoken to, much larger numbers than what we find in here tonight, are actually in support of fluoride and would be very upset with us if we chose to remove the fluoride from our water. So that's one perspective. Another thing is, you know, this idea that, you know, well, we've got fluoride in our toothpaste, you know, you can get it in your mouthwash, you can buy water, fluoridated water. I know that's true. I've seen it in the grocery store. The issue with that is that we are making assumptions that all of our citizens always have toothpaste, always have mouthwash, and always can afford to go buy fluoridated water. And the fact of the matter is that is not true. It's not true. I know people who struggle financially in such a way that toothpaste might not always be available. And who wants to be the parent who says, you know, you got to brush your teeth with water today? That happens in our community. So I don't want to make the assumption that all of our residents have access to fluoride. But another thing that I thought about today, you know, I've received a number of emails about this issue long before we got here, and actually the vast majority of them were in support of fluoridated water. But, you know, one of the emails from a dentist really stuck with me, right? Because we're talking about measures that the city takes to protect folks from tooth decay. Tooth decay that disproportionately affects low-income children living in poverty. And so I thought about, you know, I had a friend, this was years and years and years ago when we were very young and very little money, and a friend who was on Medicaid, and at that time, and I don't know, it might be different, but at that time, getting dental care was very difficult for Medicaid patients, and her daughter had a really bad cavity. And in order to get this cavity taken care of, she had to wait a month for her appointment in Ann Arbor. And we were scrambling to figure out how to get this child to Ann Arbor for her dentist appointment so she could get this cavity filled. In the meantime, she would cry herself to sleep some nights because it was so painful. And being one of the people who held her on some of those nights, I can't imagine removing fluoride from our water and creating this sort of situation where we have a much larger number of children dealing with tooth decay than we already have. Again, that we're talking about disproportionately affecting low-income children who don't have access to some of the things we mentioned before. That's not something I can do in good conscience. And I hear, you know, what folks are saying about the studies, and I've looked at them. I have. And I have looked at the other studies. And frankly, the research is on the side of fluoridated water right now. It is. And so, you know, for those reasons, I can't vote against the will of the majority of the people in our community, and I can't make a decision that's going to disproportionately harm low-income children. So I'll be in support.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Lazard?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to first thank everyone for coming out tonight and giving up your time, not just tonight, but in general. You know, you very clearly care about the community, and I want to thank you for that. You know, this is an issue that I occasionally dive into, very interested in it, have been for years, and there's very compelling evidence on both sides. There's unfortunately a lot of noise on both sides with sort of junk data out there, and At times it can be really difficult to jump into because there's so much information, credible information in that, and also otherwise. So I like the idea of a conversation about it, but at the same time, I think that needs to be a community conversation that we haven't had yet. You know, to make a decision to go from what we have to something different is not a decision I could make tonight without a wider discussion. You know, 2 years ago, I was in Portland for a week-long training, and it was on their ballot. And, you know, I just saw a very robust, you know, community discussion on that. And if we were to make a change, I would want to have that type of community discussion because, you know, sitting up here at this dais with the information I've researched over the years, I have not been compelled yet to say that we should not have this. That doesn't mean I couldn't be compelled in the future, but that's sort of where I'm at today, and I wanted to share that with all of you. Certainly you're owed that as members of the community who've come out and been passionate about this issue and spent so much time over the years. So thank you. And
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Mayor Cooney?
Well, thanks a lot for coming out, and I'm sure that you deeply care, and you can teach me a lot of things. You know, I think that the preponderance of the evidence is that we should have fluoride in our water. But I haven't read your studies, and I would be willing to postpone this to give me a chance to read what you brought forth to us tonight. But right now, it would take a lot to convince me that we shouldn't continue the practice, because I think the testimony of the experts is very much in favor of continuing fluoride in the water. But I would be willing to postpone the vote on this so I had a chance to read some of the things that were presented tonight.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'm going to have the city manager share some thoughts as well while we're in this discussion.
I think there was a question during the public comment about the source of these funds and relative to our projected shortfall. Keep in mind that the monies used to pay for this additive are from our water system and paid for through our water rates and not general fund monies. And it comes from the entire system, which extends beyond the city of Kalamazoo. So just a little clarification there.
Thank you. And Commissioners, I think that you know, we've had this discussion over and over and over for many, many years. And I'm all about having a community conversation if we want to go that route. I do understand that we can certainly buy the fluoridation over with change orders and what have you if we want to continue. The challenge we have is certainly what almost all of you have said, is we have significant evidence stating that this makes sense and is important to the health of our community. And we have other evidence that states the opposite. So it's upon us to make a decision. And I'm with most of you. I'm not prepared to take this out of our water. I'm always happy to have and willing for us to have some type of community dialogue on this. But at the end of the day, you're still, I believe, going to have one side stating this and one side stating that. And then, of course, as with many of the issues up here, you're going to have to determine what you want to do. So I guess for me, I'm going to support this tonight. And if there's some other work that folks want to have done and want staff to do, then we can give direction for that to be done. But I'm not prepared to vote no on this evening. So that's where I stand. Clerk Borland, please call the roll.
Commissioner Milzarek.
yes.
Commissioner Sykes.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Cooney.
No.
Mayor Hopewell.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Knott.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. Mr. Manager, you have a report this evening?
Yeah, information was conveyed last week to the commission. I just want to state it here tonight that the Community Planning and Development Department will be making changes to rental housing certification program rules and procedures. And many of these improvements come as a result of community conversations with property owners and housing agencies, and are intended to improve communication and interactions between the city and rental property owners, and provide every opportunity for property owners to benefit from incentives to maintain properties and obtain timely recertification. So staff will intend to implement these changes in early March and will utilize the communication channels such as the quarterly housing newsletter, website, and email blast to communicate the improved procedures. If you have any questions or concerns, please let Director Lamb know, and we'll go accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Attorney, you have a report this evening?
Yes, Your Honor. Couple of things I'd like to report. The first one is just information, and as the commission may know, the legislature late in 2015 passed Public Act 269, which changed certain aspects of the Michigan's election laws, which basically, in what they did kind of at the 11th hour, was adopt a provision that precludes mass communication by elected figures on any local proposal 60 days before the election. As in my role of as the president of the Michigan Association of Municipal Attorneys, and we're kind of a member organization of the Michigan Municipal League, I was involved last week in working with getting amicus curiae counsel to file a brief in the federal case that was filed that would seek to put an injunction against the operation of that particular clause of the election law change. As of late this afternoon, I was on a conference call and I related the experience of the city of Kalamazoo, of our clerk's office, who in the last general elections have put out a 8-page folder to voters within that 60-day window, that all it is just a sample ballot along with a tear-out sheet so you can fill out who you want to vote for, how you're going to vote on the proposals, and take it with you to the polls. The attorney who is working on the amicus said, "Can you get that to me? Because that would be great for our argument." And so late this afternoon, Deputy Clerk Moss signed a declaration, and we sent a copy of the 2014 pamphlet that was used, which had 5 charter amendments. And under the law, we wouldn't have been able to put that out if the current law had been in place in 2014. So that's going to be part of the briefing that will go before the federal judge in a hearing on Thursday. The other thing that I wanted, and I'm going to ask you to take action on this evening, is that the city city representatives continue to meet with representatives of the outlying townships and authorities regarding the dispute between those entities over water and sewer rates. We had a very good meeting a few weeks ago. We had another one just Friday morning, and again made some further progress in discussing how we can kind of close the gap between the two positions. Unfortunately, the tolling agreement that would preclude the townships from resurrecting their lawsuit, which was dismissed, expired on the 29th. It was agreed the townships are willing to increase it, that time period, or extend it to February 29th, and this evening I'm asking for your permission to also sign that extension to the 29th of February, along with, rather than coming back to you, because we really do have a couple of day gap because of the end of January and your meeting tonight, that you authorize myself and special counsel to give us permission to extend those so we don't have to keep coming back to the commission. Of course, I will keep you informed as the progress is made, but rather than be caught between when the end of a month and your next commission meeting and have that gap, I prefer not that to happen. So with that, I would ask that the mayor seek a motion authorizing myself and special counsel to execute the second extension and any other extensions to the tolling agreement that currently exists between the city and those townships and authorities that receive water and sewer services.
Commissioners, that is the requested action. Is there a motion? Moved by Commissioner Knott, supported by Commissioner Urban. Anyone in the audience wanting to comment on this item, please step to the podium. You'll have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within the city. Seeing no one, discussion, Commissioners? Clerk Forling, please call the roll.
Commissioner Sykes,
Yes.
Commissioner Urban,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Cooney,
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Knott,
Yes.
Commissioner Milzarek.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. Anything else, Mr. Attorney?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you. We are now at the opportunity for any citizen to comment this evening. Please step to the podium. You'll have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within the city. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. You know, I kind of took a trip over to Battle Creek.
Could we have your name and
Oh,
whether you
Drake
live in the
Warren, I live at Glen Terrace. I'm sorry, Bob.
city? Thank you.
Anyway, I took a trip over to Battle Creek to see how they're doing the Veterans Court over there in Kalamazoo, over in Battle Creek, and it's doing very good. In fact, I'm going to be a mentor over there helping some veterans through the program so that he don't have to go to prison. It's just like your drug court here in Kalamazoo. None of you've never been there to see how that's operated. If you haven't, it's a good idea to try to see how it's operated, because our drug court in Kalamazoo here graduated last year 30 people. If you multiply 30 by $50,000 a year that they send a guy to prison, that's what it costs you to put a prisoner in prison for 1 year, is $50,000. You multiply that 30 by 50,000, what do you get? A hell of a lot of money that this city has saved Governor Snyder. I'm not talking about saving nobody else, but Governor Snyder don't know how much he saved up there when he got these drug courts going. But that's how much you've saved. To put a kid through drug court's about $5,000. And I've been helping out the drug court coming up on 20 years coming April. And I enjoy, and like I told one person, I had another guy tell me, you enjoy doing this? I said, if you don't enjoy doing this, then you shouldn't be doing it. This is a program where you have to enjoy doing what you're doing for people. And if you don't like to, if you're not enjoying it, then you need to get away from it. But I was over at Battle Creek, has quite a experience watching them over there in their drug court veterans, and I hope that we get that. I know it's going to be started here in Kalamazoo very shortly, but when, I don't know, because I've heard Dave Fuller said it's on the books to get it started, and I'm just waiting for it to, so I can help out over here if I have to. I'm one of these guys that keep helping out. One of these days I'm going to have to retire, you know, but I won't. But like I said, also when we talked about fluoridation of this water, well, you know, I'm an old man, 83, we'll go be 83 February. In 2 weeks I'll be 83 years old. You know, I enjoy doing what I do with that, but you know what? It ain't bothered me since they had that in the water. The only thing I get tired of is tasting the damn stuff when I'm drinking coffee. You know, it's in your coffee and you can't get it out, but if it wasn't in the coffee, I could get by with it, because the coffee is what I drink a lot of, and it's got flavor, but lately the coffee don't have flavor like it used to because of all the stuff they put in the water, but that's here and there, and I hope we don't get in the same mess that Flint's in. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, please. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Reverend Barrett Lee. I'm the pastor of North Presbyterian Church, and I am a resident here in the Vine neighborhood. So, thank you. I have come here tonight. My coming was foretold by my brother, Pastor Strickland, who has had to go. I stand here tonight by myself, but I am not alone. I have with me a letter that has been signed by 20 of my fellow Kalamazoo clergy members representing 9 different denominations, and one signature that is not on here but asked to be, but did not get in time to be on here, is Reverend Steve Charney of First United Methodist Church. So I'd like to make mention of him. Also included are pastors from all of the Bronson Park churches around here. I'd like to read this letter to you. The moral imperative to welcome refugees, migrant workers, and other strangers in need can be found throughout the pages of the Bible. In the book of Genesis, God called the patriarch Abraham, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. Several generations later, severe famine forced Abraham's descendants to relocate to the land of Egypt. While they were initially welcomed into that country, Abraham's descendants were eventually labeled as a threat to national security by a racist government that subjected them to policies of forced labor and genocide. In response to these crimes against humanity, God raised up Moses as a liberator who led the people of Israel to a new life in a land of freedom. Along the way, God gave the Israelites a new command to ensure that the atrocities of Egypt would never be repeated by Abraham's descendants. God said, "You shall not oppress a resident alien. You know the heart of an alien, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt." In the New Testament, Jesus Christ continues this ethical tradition. In his teaching, Jesus said in Matthew 25, "I was a stranger and you welcomed me." His followers asked, "Lord, when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you?" Jesus replied, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me." Based on these and many other passages of sacred scripture, we, the clergy of Kalamazoo, believe it is our bounden Christian duty to open the doors of our community to offer hospitality and assistance to these, our fellow human beings. They are now arriving on the shores of this country, fleeing death by violence or starvation. They come to us from many directions, bringing with them a brilliant rainbow of many different languages, skin tones, cultural traditions, and religious beliefs. They come asking only that we acknowledge their inalienable right to exist. Sadly, there are many voices at work in this country and in the state of Michigan who would use this humanitarian crisis as an opportunity to garner power for themselves. They use the same slanderous political tactics employed by Pharaoh in the book of Exodus. They manipulate the fears of the general populace with the specter of terrorism. Their xenophobia and lust for power has led them to blatant disregard for the lives of fellow human beings in need. As Christians, we call upon the leadership of Kalamazoo to resist these lies, heeding the cry of the poor and the biblical command, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." Congregations stand ready to work together in sponsoring, welcoming, and assisting refugee families of all ethnic and religious backgrounds. We need the support of this city's leadership in order to fulfill our Christian calling and honor the inclusive values that make our city, state, and country so great. We strongly urge the City Commission of Kalamazoo to adopt the attached resolution to this letter. And I have this to leave with you that has been submitted. The motion has been submitted by.
Thank you, sir. Next, please. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Tim Graham, and I'm a citizen. 2016 is a pivotal year for the state and the city's long-term sustainable future. We all know that. We've been talking about it. Governor Snyder tipped his hand in the State of the State message when he talked about his 2016 priorities by setting up two task forces. One, at least in my mind, economic development, and I would say development, but economic development, and also 21st century infrastructure. I have a Prudential Investment Management Group report called The Wealth of Cities, the Investment Implications of Urban Expansion. It talks about the mega trend of urban expansion. 200 new megacities of over 1 million people will be created between now and 2030. The rapid pace of urbanization, 60 to 70 million people will be added to the total global urban population each year for the next 30 years. So there's a hell of a lot of people that are going to be migrating from where they are now. Not necessarily in this country, but I would argue in this region we need to consider that. How can we get people to migrate from outside of the city of Kalamazoo to the core of this region and county? David Rusk in the Kalamazoo Compact in 1998 showed what happens in our political structure in the state of Michigan when he compared Grand Rapids, which is only 175,000 people and was there, to Charlotte back in the 90s, which was less than Grand Rapids. Today, Charlotte is 2 million people and growing. So contrary to the megatrends in the world and the smart cities, and thinking about what Mr. Tom Friedman from the New York Times wrote in his book, The World is Flat, I think the world is going to force the state of Michigan and the city of Kalamazoo to go with the trend rather than against the trend. When you look at Michigan cities and their health, they're dead. They're dying. You have extreme and concentrated poverty. Cities are a low priority. Suburbanization and sprawl reigns. And the suburbs is where the wealth and the poor is inordinately concentrated, which is one of our problems here in the city because we have no private investment. You have single uses in Michigan instead of mixed uses and mixed income. Highways, cars, and the automobile industry control. So I would highly urge the commissioners and the city manager to follow Governor Snyder's lead. Economic development and the infrastructure, which is not just roads and highways and bridges, but the digital infrastructure, the built environment, the planning of this town and city is our priority number one. Our Blue Ribbon Task Force failed to focus on their charge. They were asked to talk about sustainable revenues. They talked about cost cuts. They talked about one-time asset sales. That's not long-term sustainable. We need long-term sustainable revenues. And Kalamazoo 2025, I'm hearing, and I applaud Laura Lamb and Rebecca Kick, is starting a long-term visioning house party campaign, I think this Friday, to start community dialogues, because we're not going to solve our problems in the city, I don't think, unless business, which right now is completely absent from the conversation, government, nonprofits, and most importantly, the civil society, the people that live here, have cross-border.
Thank you, sir. Your time has expired. Next, please. Good evening, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Barbara Blumhart, and I also live in the Vine Street neighborhood, and I have something really good to say, actually. I'm not going to complain tonight, which is unusual for me, so. But I woke up this morning to the backing up of a big truck into cones outside of my front yard, and to my surprise and happiness, I ran outside in my pajama bottoms, but they were, appropriate. And I hugged these guys that had hard hats on, and they were beginning to cut down my tree after 6 years of begging and pleading. And finally, my husband took a branch down and put it on the counter, and we finally got an answer. And they came to test the tree, and it was dead. I mean, you don't need to be a scientist to know that a tree is dead. It had been falling on our house for about 3 or 4 years, and it was becoming a problem for the sidewalk and also the street. So it was dangerous all the way around, but they finally did it this morning. I gave them all hugs. I Facebooked it. I go crazy on Facebook. You know that, Aaron, a little shooting from the hip, pretty emotional. Mayor Hopewell, you remember last month? So I just want to say you guys did really, I don't know if you had anything to do with that, but thank you. We appreciate it. You can actually see our house now. We might be able to sell it. I doubt it, but we're trying. If we can just do one house or one tree at a time on that block, and if we can come together as a community, we could just help each other and have a better understanding, more unity and less maybe judgment. And I'm all part of that because I'm the first one to run out there with a stick and say, get off my lawn. I'm part of it. I'm part of the problem, but I'm also the only person on that whole block that owns their own house. So it kind of makes it tough for me. Everything else is rental. So you can understand my frustration. I know I thank the police more than I thank my own husband. So, so now you know where I stand. So thank you, city commissioners, mayor, police officers, husband. Thanks. That's all.
Thank you.
So
ma'am.
that's a good thing, right?
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. I think previously when I spoke, I identified myself, and I still say it's true that I live in the city, so it's relevant, supposedly. And, I count David Anderson as one of my 7 close personal friends, I call them, which mean a great deal to me, perhaps even more than some of my marriages, although that's extreme and it happens to be the case with me. Tonight, unfortunately, I need to disagree vigorously with one point David made, and in doing so, it doesn't affect the close personal friendship, because many times my friends have taken stands directly opposite me, but we've still kept up the friendship, and I wanted to precede my remarks with that. What I understood David to be saying in his rather lengthy speech about the fluoridation, and I'm sorry that my friends who opposed the fluoridation of Kalamazoo water have apparently left. I would claim that's very poor citizenship, but that's the way it goes. However, when David came out strong for fluoridations, as I see it, and persuaded perhaps some of the rest of the commission to go along with him, his point, as I see it, was that for something like that, we go to the experts. And the county commissioner for health or something like that, in his opinion, was the expert, and the testimony of half a dozen citizens, more or less all opposing fluoridation, were not experts, and therefore their testimony was less significant, and we went with the one person supposedly an expert. Well, now wait. I want to testify from my own life experience that sometimes, in fact, fairly often sometimes, the experts can go wildly wrong. First of all, my mother testified to me before she died that when she was in her, probably fairly young, like in her 20s maybe, a doctor, an MD, told her to take up smoking because it would clear out her nasal passages. Well, she took up smoking. She got hooked on a very harsh cigarette brand called Cools that are hard to give up, apparently. And when she developed cancer, partially, I think, as a result, she could not seem to quit. The powerful addictive force of tobacco was too much for her. They operated several times to try to take out the cancer. It came right back, and she died of it, partially due to this expert medical testimony that tobacco would clear out your nasal passages. I still have some time left, and in my own case, I was given about 100 of the so-called shock treatments. Well, I looked it up in medical manuals, and 5% of the time it can cause moderate brain damage. With 100, you have to figure out the chance of not getting moderate brain damage, which is 0.95, the other correlate, and you take that to the 100th power with a calculator, and you get 0.006 as the chance of not having moderate brain damage. Well, that's not very good, and that means 0.6% is your chance to not have moderate brain damage. Now I guess my time is just about up, but what I want to say is that with David, I vigorously disagree to say that don't trust the experts. Figure it out for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, sir.
Oh my gosh. Good evening, Chris Mba, resident of Kalamazoo. We had an opportunity lost to have real dialogue and exchange in order to make decisions democratically, which I assume is the principal foundation of this nation. That opportunity has been lost, and decisions have been made under the guise of expertise and authority. I really would hope that this commission would be more democratic, progressive, as some of you have called yourself or have been associated as. And this, please, this is not a criticism. I am hoping that this commission will not be just like the others. Commissions that have not been responsive to opening the conversation before making those decisions. Help walking hand in hand with your residents to make these decisions. Of course, we have heated discussions and debates, one person on one side of the aisle, another person on the side of the aisle. But we have to work together, right? We have that democratic principle where you don't just shut out one side because the other side disagrees with you. Thank you, Don, for voting in favor of no. Please consider having a dialogue. That's all these people asked. Sure, they had their side and their agenda, but isn't that worth listening to? Isn't that worth working out before you make the decision? Isn't that worth understanding their perspective and their point of view? Come on, guys. We're looking to you to lead us. We know we're facing very challenging times. And in these challenging times, you will rely on the citizens to come forth and step up. Where will you be when that decision needs to be made? Where will they be when that decision needs to be made? We need to think about creating a more democratic society here in Kalamazoo. Let's be known for that. Let's be known for that inclusive decision making. I know you guys love this city. I know you guys love this city. Many of you have been born and raised here all your life. I have not. I've seen many countries, seen many cities. Some of them in countries you call third world, who people have better teeth than most of you here. And we do not have fluoride. In fact, the biggest cause of people's teeth rotting in this country is because they allow additives in foods that are banned in other countries. See, these are perspectives that you would not allow into your understanding because there is no dialogue in the decision making. We got to do better. We got to do better. We got to push ourselves as leaders to have these unconventional conversations. Let's no longer brush off people and bring in experts, one expert. Let's have real democracy in Kalamazoo. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, please.
My name's Zachary Lassiter, and I live in the city of Kalamazoo. I think we did have a dialogue tonight. It's not a perfect dialogue, but it was a dialogue. As I understand it, several people emailed or reached out to you otherwise before tonight. That's a dialogue. But as far as us having a community conversation, wide conversation about every small little decision we have to make in this community, that's just not possible, nor is it feasible. This is a representative democracy. We vote on people that we think should make decisions regarding the day-to-day operations of the city, and that's what you guys do. Yes, there was some conversation you had. You heard a lot of sides, I'm sure. I'm sure you guys got emails. But the reality is, if we want to reach out to you guys about something, we have 4 minutes here, we have emails, we have phones, we have mail, every other, we could walk into you guys on the street sometimes and talk to you. There is conversation going on, and if people want to talk to you, they know how to reach out to you. And the fact that people are saying there's not conversation about this, yeah, there probably could be better conversation, but that's because people don't want to talk to you. If they want to talk to you, they know how. And they have 4 minutes here, they have out on the street, they have a phone, they have an email, they have a way to write a letter too. And I'm sure you guys read all of those. And I'm sure a lot of you even reply to them. But saying that there isn't conversation is just not true. And we vote to, it's a representative democracy. We vote on you guys so you guys can make the decisions. If we don't like what we vote, you guys vote on, well, that comes up every 4 years or 2 years, depending on, So I just think there was conversation tonight.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wanting to address the commission this evening? Good evening, ma'am.
Hi, Krista Rustenholtz, Kalamazoo resident, lifetime. I wanted to comment again on the fluoride. I'm glad that you guys did have a bit of a conversation, but I agree that it could be more of a conversation. I would like to see this maybe put to a vote, because there is two very strong sides. I think that would be cool if it went to the community. Let us, people actually voted for you guys, let us vote on it. Back to that, you made a point about the fluoride being targeted for young and low-income kids. That was a big part of it. But you're also looking at the whole community, and you're looking at this just little spot of low-income kids. I'm college educated. We used to have money, used to work full-time till my husband was disabled, and now we are in a situation of being at the poverty level, which is very strange to go from, middle class, educated kind of area, and all of a sudden you're in a really bad spot. So I see a lot of those kids every day. And unfortunately, I don't think adding fluoride is doing anything to help them, because it's the parents that aren't getting up with their kids in the morning and making sure that they brush their teeth. It's the parents that are letting them drink Kool-Aid and pop. They're not drinking the fluoridated water. So I don't think that's a very good argument, saying you're trying to help one tiny little group of people instead of there's all this evidence of other things. But I get what you're saying, but you can maybe use that money instead of putting it just blindly into the water and, $100,000 of that literally going down the drain. You could use some of that money to actually go into the communities where there's these people that need the help, teach the parents about these things, and use the money that way instead of just flushing it down the toilet, because that seems like a really city waste of resources. To actually put it directly with the people you're trying to help, I think that would make more sense. And the other thing that really wasn't addressed tonight was the quality. There was a lot of talk about, Flint and all that stuff, but I didn't really hear any of you really say what you're going to do to make sure our water is okay here, because there was a lot of concern with the really high lead levels. I was hoping people would talk about that. You seemed like you were into it. You seemed like you were into it, which we appreciate that. But he's saying there wasn't a dialogue. There was a conversation. There wasn't really. I think this could be a lot better, and we could talk about things more. So, can we vote on something like that? How does that work? Does it just get put to a vote? Can we get that on the ballot? No. You guys look so bored. I can't even tell. You guys have just been staring at us all day. Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, please. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Beth Lewis, and I live in the city of Kalamazoo. And I don't really have a side to take on fluoride. I've lived in cities where they had fluoride, and I've lived in places where they didn't have fluoride. And I think it's sort of like a comparison. Let me make the comparison of margarine or oleo to butter. Okay? When I came to Kalamazoo in '69, the Western Michigan University Home Economics Department was using the new, quote, knowledge of our factors of butter and margarine in teaching home economics. And they taught us that, oh, margarine is so much better for you. It doesn't contain the fat that butter has. Okay? But now we're in 2016. We're not living in 1969 anymore. And it's taken them that long to decide that butter is actually better for you than margarine because it doesn't coat your veins as much. I'm not saying which is right or which isn't. I'm just saying the fluoride in the water is a similar thing. We're all living in an era of guinea pigs. We may take 100 years yet, and in 100 years, people will look back and say, oh, look at all those silly people and how they used fluoride in their water. Ooh. And it might go the opposite direction and say, oh, how wonderful they were to be advanced enough to know that fluoride was good in the water. We don't know. It's all a guessing game, and we're the guinea pigs. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else wanting to address the commission this evening? Seeing no one, we are now at Commissioners' comments. Commissioner Milzarek.
Thank you, Mayor. Once again, I'd like to thank everyone who came out tonight. Always appreciate the dialogue. As we talk about discussion, it's vital that we keep in mind that this discussion happens not just here today, but out in the community. Just moments ago, we're faced with sort of the reality of we can't go back and forth with folks in the audience here. This just isn't the venue for that. So just to the community, thank you for coming here tonight, but let's keep talking in general, on all topics. In regards to health issues and experts, I do agree sometimes experts are wrong, which is why we should always be open to learning new things. I think Western medicine, can really drop the ball on some issues. So yeah, I'm always open to the discussion, and we should never have an issue be settled for good. Always appreciate the passions of folks in the communities willing to push the envelope on things. Wanted to speak on two other things. We had some comments about urban centers and cities of the future. And I think this is really the national trend that we're facing in America. People want to move back to the cities. I mean, it's sort of the symbol of my generation. We were raised in the suburbs. We hated it because it's boring. We want to live in cities. We want to be in communities. That's where it's at. So that's a great thing for a city like Kalamazoo. On the flip side, we're in Michigan, which I think has historically been an unfriendly environment towards cities with a variety of policies. Many of which we're feeling the realities of today with our revenues and other problems. So we just have to keep these two dynamics in mind as we really try to be creative moving into the future on how we're going to capitalize on this national trend, but deal with the restraints in our legal system here in Michigan. So just some thoughts on that. And lastly, I did want to touch on lead. It's a subject I'm passionate about. My child has had elevated lead levels. I'm a state licensed lead inspector, risk assessor. I want to caution the public that, you read a lot of news articles out there and it sort of just says lead. Lead levels are here, lead levels are there. And, you look down in the comments and...
Commissioner, there's someone in the audience that's talking. I don't know where it's coming from, but if you'd step out of the chambers if you need to do that. I don't know where it's coming from, but it's a little disruptive.
Thank you.
Sorry, Commissioner.
As I read these articles, you can clearly see a lot of people maybe read a headline and sort of react based on the headline without reading the article. So I just want to caution, there's lead levels in water. And that's certainly a topic that's been very hot with Flint going on. And then there's lead levels in children, which may or may not come from water, but the highest source of lead poisoning of children is lead dust in the home. That's 70% of the poisoning cause for children. The next being lead in soil. So I just really want to caution the public, when you read articles on lead, really dig down deep in the details, which might not even be in the article. There's a lot of horribly written articles out there, if I'm being honest. So there's just, before you get in a panic on what may or may not be happening in a community, really make sure you understand what those numbers are. Also in regards to numbers in our community, certainly, there was an MLive article out about water in Kalamazoo, 13 parts per billion. Being a commissioner, I wanted to look into these numbers. We have access to the latest reports. The most recent testing, there were out of 59 samples taken, there were 6 that had detectable levels of lead. The rest didn't. You couldn't even detect any within the sample. So out of those 6, there were 3 that were above the action level. 1 was actually just right at the action level, and 2 were above. The city replaced the lead lines on all of those homes. There's a lot more fine details I could get into that, but just so you know, as a public, it's something certainly I take seriously. I looked into it, and we do have a policy, from my understanding, that we replace lead service lines when we find elevated levels, and that those three, we did just that. But certainly, if there's something that the public thinks is happening that we need to know, I'm always game to hear more information. So just wanted to throw those thoughts out there, and that's all.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Urban. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hatt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, and fellow commissioners. I want you to get excited because we're going to go canvassing together in a couple of weeks. As you may or may not know, Commissioner Sykes and Milzarek and myself have been going through a boot camp, and I'd like to thank Director Lamb for the multiple sessions that we've had. And out of that, we learned more about the Kalamazoo 2025 or the Vision Imagine Kalamazoo process. And in one of those sessions, we learned about the house parties and all the opportunities for engagement. And if you know me, you know that I am interested in increasing accessibility. House parties, yeah, I want more house parties. Increasing accessibility and the opportunities for our residents to get engaged. And so we're all seasoned campaigners, and it's been a few months, and I think that we're getting out of shape and out of practice. So I had a meeting with Rebecca Kick today to talk about how us as a commission can go out with our volunteers to hit some doors, and we're looking at 2 weeks in March, potentially Saturday the 19th and the 26th with maybe a couple of evenings to take that Imagine Kalamazoo survey out and talk to some residents in our neighborhood. So you've been put on notice. Thank you.
The newbies telling us. I love it.
That's great.
I love it. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Sykes.
Yeah, and I just want to say that if anybody wants to come volunteer with us and help us knock those doors, that would be great, in addition to the commissioners. So a couple of thoughts tonight. So I am often the one who's like, but what about all the people in poverty? That's not a popular stance to take. You know, very often, you're talking to folks, their eyes glaze over, or, there's, as one individual, nobody tonight, said to me, well, those people, they don't have enough of that, go get it. They didn't say lazy, but, they don't get out and work hard enough. But I have to say that unfortunately our poverty rate is not a small pocket. It's not a small group of folks. I wish that were true. Our poverty rates are they're extremely high, and I find that very troublesome. And it's also, and I grew up in poverty. I spent probably the majority of my life living in poverty. And I feel for the citizen who said she's now struggling with that. But I'm going to say it's a misnomer that the majority of parents living in poverty aren't taking care of their kids, aren't getting up with them, aren't trying to do the right thing, aren't educated enough to do the right thing. The vast majority of them are really good parents. And poverty does not make bad parents. And I cannot not say that tonight. That being said, I love politics. I love elections. I fully support a ballot initiative. If folks want this on the ballot and want to vote about whether or not they want fluoride in their water, I would fully support that. I don't know that process actually comes from us. I believe that comes from the citizens. I believe the citizens would have to push that. And I'm not 100%. I can look into it. But I would fully support that. There was another comment made about, not having enough conversation and enough dialogue, and having one expert in the room. I want to reiterate what I said earlier, in that I have been having this conversation with citizens since August. Lots of citizens. So it is false that we have not been talking to folks. I know my fellow commissioners have been doing the same thing. We never get up here and just make decisions based on one person or one study. That's not something that happens. That being said, I know that this Saturday we will be talking during our retreat process about ways to increase community dialogue. Please, if you have any input at all, please come out on Saturday and be a part of that conversation so that we can find the best way to reach everybody. It's so important. I was there. I was not a commissioner last year, but I was there in the audience last year, and it was a really good thing to witness. And then one more thing I want to say. I want to thank the gentleman who challenged us not to compare ourselves to Flint. Matt talked about some of our lead levels that tested at or above the recommended safe level. We don't have any houses testing at 4,000 parts per billion. Not even close. And to me, my fear is that if we spend too much time saying, oh, well, yeah, it's a problem in Flint, but it's a problem everywhere. It's a problem here too. We take our eyes off of the real suffering that our neighbors in Flint are going through. And if we take our eyes off of their suffering, it's much easier for folks not to respond to their needs. And so I beg folks in our community, don't get me wrong, I care about lead. I want to make sure that we're doing the right thing in the city, in the county, and everywhere else around lead. And we will be. We will be, and we will stay on top of it. I will stay on top of it. But please, let's not take the focus off of how many people are hurting in Flint, because they need us right now, probably more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Anderson?
Thank you, Mayor. A couple things. I wanted just to clarify, there was a comment made about that Portage is doing some free testing on water. And is there some clarification from what the city of Kalamazoo is doing?
Sure. I would call Director Found up to explain what we've been doing and will be doing around lead testing, if that's okay? Sure. Great.
Good evening, Madam Director.
Good evening. As far as free testing, the City of Kalamazoo has always offered free testing for lead and copper. That's in our annual report. Currently, we are getting several calls from citizens, from the schools, Western, K College, the hospitals. We're doing special testing at all of those facilities too. So we're actually putting a team together that will be going out and actually doing the sampling versus having the entities do the sampling. So we are working on that. And we most likely will be doing our triennial sampling event that is due in 2017 and 2016.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Director. And then I wanted to talk about what we did vote on tonight. It was originally item F3 on the consent agenda. And that item was not an item that said, refuse to ever talk about this topic again, lock ourselves in with no choice in the future. That was not what the item was. The item was approval of a 1-year contract extension to purchase this material that we've been adding for years and years to the city of Kalamazoo for reasons that we understand to be good ones. So just because this happened tonight, that does not mean that this did not have to go down tonight for there to be any further discussion. That does not preclude us from involving ourselves in any other interesting dialogue related to this particular activity the city of Kalamazoo is involved in. So I want to, in some ways, de-emphasize the action that we took tonight. It was, it was a temporal action in time that occurred at this meeting relative to an ongoing activity. So there is still continuing opportunity. This doesn't force us to do anything for a year even. There's continuing opportunity to have broader discussions for all those interested. So I just want to clarify that. And then lastly, I guess I wanted to build on something that my friend Aisha mentioned tonight. And that is this, that he made it very clear to everybody in the room that we absolutely disagree on a particular topic. And I am very happy that everybody knows that. And I'm also additionally happy that another thing we are reminded is that Aisha and I are two people that live in the same city that happen to evidently disagree about this particular topic, which I became aware of this evening. And we will leave and still be friends. And it's because we both care about the city of Kalamazoo, and even though we have our disagreements, we are not going to use that disagreement to disparage or marginalize or somehow diminish each other, or in some fashion attempt to create a situation where our difference of opinion makes it obvious that one of us evidently does not care about the city of Kalamazoo. And I thought that for me was a powerful statement. I appreciate that very much, and I intend to attempt to do a better job of that myself, even when I disagree, to allow the disagreement to sit on its own and to do my best job of appreciating the energy and attention and love that the person I am disagreeing with still has for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Mayor Cooney.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank Pastor Lee for coming down tonight. And I think that is a wonderful idea that we should pass a proclamation declaring Kalamazoo a welcoming community. There are so many people who are trying to tear us apart at this time, to make us sink back into individualism and see other people as the enemy and the threat. We need to emphasize our common humanity and our responsibility to each other. So I thank you for that. Secondly, I would remind people that this is Black History Month. And Commissioner Sykes was talking about poverty. And the poverty rate in our African American community is totally disproportionate to the rest of the country and to the rest of our community. And there are historical roots to that. And it's very important that during this month we reflect on that and our responsibilities to do something about that. Finally, the last thing I wanted to say to the young lady that asked, can we vote on this? You can. And you should talk to the city clerk about the process. But I believe there's two different ways you could do it. One is we could vote as a commission to put something on the ballot. The second way would be that you could take up petitions. And if you get a certain number of signatures, then it goes on the ballot. And it's not that difficult to get that number of signatures. So it's very possible to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Just real quick, I'll try to go quickly. Your last statement was the exact statement I was going to say, that we have a city clerk. He knows everything there is about everything there is related to elections and ballots and what have you. You may not know that, but we know that, and he would have certainly talked to you after this meeting. Sometimes when we hear things that come from the podium, we may not react because there's this back and forth. I'm not an expert on everything. And sometimes we start wandering into conversations, and then I get a nudge here, a nudge there. And so it's better, in my opinion, at times to allow you to say what you want to say. We have umpteen staff in the back of the room that hear it, and some of them get up during the meeting and come talk to you about an issue or what have you. So that's part of why we don't do the back and forth. Truly, this is a business meeting to take care of the immediate business of the city. But sometimes, and I'll say this, and I truly mean this, sometimes things come to that podium that really isn't city business. So we don't even know what's going to be said, and how do I dive in and be an expert on what that issue is? I'm not sure that we're always well informed to do that. But I knew the clerk was poised and ready to speak with you this evening about ballots and answering that question for you. And often we will try to answer what we think we know, and then we'll get a nudge saying, well, yeah, you're right or wrong during our comments. And I'm also going to make sure that if these two gentlemen have anything they want to say tonight before we adjourn, they have that opportunity to do that. I want to also, this might surprise some, agree with Mr. Graham tonight. What he said this evening is truly one of the things we have to be thinking about, how we grow and how we develop our community. It's not a simple conversation, and some don't want to have it. I would submit to you, beyond just talking about growing and developing and building and whatever, when are we going to have the community conversation about, how do we have more of a unified government in our county? Why are there so many jurisdictions in our county? And we've talked about this. There's no surprise in that. What we have, I know Mr. Graham probably knows, 25 jurisdictions or in the 20s or something like that. Why is that? As we talk about community and how we survive, because we all need each other to make it. So I think I very much appreciated those comments and opportunities to try to drive that work, I think, is part of the work we need to do this year. Real quick on the fluoride piece, and Vice Mayor Cooney, I wanted to make sure that if we want to have a community dialogue, if that's something we want as a commission, let's figure out how to do that. And that was my statement. I support fluoridation of the water, certainly at this moment. Not some expert. You know, Commissioner Urban knows more about chemicals than I will ever know. I'm not afraid of that dialogue. But tonight, this moment, I think I did what I felt needed to be done. But I also heard that we can do this month by month. So this can be turned on or turned off. So just keep that in mind. There is change orders and what have you. So as Commissioner Anderson said, I don't think there's an absolute on what the action was tonight, that there aren't opportunities to try to move in a different direction if that's what we so choose. Wanted to talk about lead for a moment. Had a meeting that Representative Hoadley held with our staff, county, state folks to talk and get some education about lead. Because there is, Commissioner Mazarek said, there is a lot of information and lack of differentiation between certain leads, from paints to old housing stock. My house is 102 years old. I was in the basement today and I see copper pipes, and I'm wondering, after speaking with the director, what's going on? Because I've lived there since 1995, so 21 years. I always thought they were cool pipes. And I'm thinking, okay, what is this? What are these? And I think that there is opportunity to have a larger community conversation. And speaking to Representative Hoadley, we've talked about a town hall meeting with county and state and city officials, a way for folks to enter a portal to be able to have more of a dialogue on this and gain some knowledge, some understanding. I also know that we are doing a lot of work every single year in regards to our mains. We had 46,000, 40,000+. Now we're down to 8,000. I'm waiting for us to get to zero, but it's not as if we have not been working on this issue. And as you think about the fluoride, and I think Commissioner Anderson mentioned it, we do add an additive into our water to help with the leaching. Well, I was expecting someone to say, stop doing that tonight. But I'm not prepared to do that because we would end up in a situation where we have a larger problem. So there is work to do, certainly, but we also have to put it into perspective, as Commissioner Mozarek said. In that case, there were 3, if I'm not mistaken. And so even our media picks up on certain pieces and writes certain things, but doesn't always provide the entire information. And then sometimes they write or they are on television or what have you, and because it's a 7-minute or 30-second soundbite, or I've got to get it in within here, there's information that can't be shared. That's not the only place we should get our information. But we tend to sometimes wander into Facebook, sometimes wander into the Twitterverse and the mediaverse, and that's an absolute. There's a lot of assumptions made. My point being is the same as Commissioner Sykes. What should we be doing? Are we doing those things? And what can we learn to do better and differently? There's space for all of that, and I know that our staff and all of you are open and have expectations, and it will hold people accountable as we move this issue forward. And we are working very hard, and the staff is working very hard to move this to a better space than it is. Wanted to talk about welcoming communities for a second. So, Pastor, I hear you. I hear you. And Commissioner Cooney, I can't disagree that we need to be a welcoming community. I'm not sure that we're not, first of all, because I'm not sure any of us have said we're not going to take this or not going to do that. I sometimes have this issue with resolutions and proclamations because I wonder what they mean sometimes. And sometimes they mean a lot, other times I go, I'm not sure. But here's where I am. I'm happy because one of the words, it's welcoming communities. I'm looking forward to this conversation at the Portage City Council and the Parchment Commission and all of those churches and everybody coming together. And I would love to have this an opportunity for all elected officials to be in a room to sign. My statement to you comes from this point of often we're the ones. And sometimes I understand we have to lead, and we lead on a whole bunch of stuff. But we get resolution after resolution after resolution. We need the city to do this. And I'm thinking, I hear people talking about community. And sometimes I hear Portage folks talking to us about doing certain things. And I'm thinking, are they having these conversations in the rest of the community? So I would encourage you folks to engage the rest of the community also as we move together on being a welcoming community. Had to say that. It was on my mind. Tomorrow, starting at 11 o'clock at Arcadia Brewing, there's an opportunity to support one of our SBK Shared Prosperity Partners, Restore Ministries. They are having a fundraiser tomorrow at Arcadia. They do work that helps with returnees who have been incarcerated, coming home to find opportunities, jobs, housing, and they're having the fundraiser, and it certainly supports the work that we've been trying to do in regards to prosperity in our community. I think I said I would go quickly. I'm sorry I did not. My apologies, but thank you everybody for being here. Happy Black History Month. Happy February. Oh, and did you two have anything? Sorry.
Yeah, I would just add, along the lines of the lead discussion, we as staff look forward to the town hall. One is, and we talked today about, the sense of trust in our safe water and establishing that or reestablishing that or keeping the trust. We certainly want to do that. So I think a lot of discussion can be had around a lot of, I think, confusing studies, results that the media's picked up on, and maybe an informed discussion will help that. We also are working on a hotline establishing a hotline that people can call, and we will get that number out, blasted out in all our communication lines to get that number out once we got some internal IT issues to work out with respect to that. But once we have that, people can call and get any information they want, request free testing and all of that. So just wanted to add that.
At the risk of calling out the mayor and vice mayor,
what do we do?
I'm reminded of a remark that was made earlier this evening by Commissioner Anderson, in that sometimes on legal issues, you have to rely upon the expertise of those who are attorneys.
See?
And,
I just knew it.
And I don't want to leave any person who's in the chamber this evening or who may be listening on television with a false sense of what the law permits. And while Clerk Borling knows a lot about the charter and how things work, ultimately he'll pick up the phone and ask me a question. And so, yes, there are ways that one can ask that certain actions be undone, but there are limits. And quite frankly, the action taken tonight can't be undone because it's not legislative, it's more administrative in nature. If you want to go to the next step in terms of an ordinance, again, it depends on how the ordinance is drafted, and is it a, if you will, something that is more toward administrative that you're not going to be able to do, or is it another way to approach it? And I guess I'm at the risk of using a ridiculous example, but I'm going to quote from a case that involved our neighbor to the south, the city of Portage, in which somebody challenged an action that was undertaken by the city of Portage. And so the Michigan Supreme Court got into a lengthy discussion as to how far the terms initiative and referendum go. And they said that if we meant an unlimited sweep, that you could bring anything under elections for initiative and referendum, you would then cause referendums on the most mundane executive matter. Whether a particular secretary or clerk is to be hired or terminated, whether the garbage to be collected on Monday or Tuesday, whether male municipal employees may wear short sleeve shirts in the summertime and female employees may wear pantsuits at any time. So the courts recognize there is a limit. And while they said the issue here was not as silly, if you will, in the case that they were considering, that's the slippery slope you get on if you say you can do it on anything. So they did say there is a limit to what you can do with initiative and referendum. Likewise, if you, the other thing you can do is to amend the charter. And again, that is a process that is governed strictly by statute, and that those rubrics have to be followed if you're going to do that. And so and you have to have a certain form of your petition. And so you have to jump through some legal hoops. And in that regard, it's not the role of the city attorney, it's not the role of the city clerk to advise people who come to the city with an idea as to, I want to circulate a petition. And it's not our jobs to bless it, you've got to do it right. We don't represent you, we represent the commission. Now, if the commission asks me to do something, we'll make sure it's done right. And we have done that when we've had charter amendments. That's my obligation. But my obligation is I'm the city attorney, I represent the corporate entity, not citizens who want to change something.
So
I just want to make sure it was clear.
Yeah, so he's making my point that I made earlier, but I don't know that anyone was saying that we're going to tell anyone how your petition has to read. But the question I thought is, how does someone put something on the ballot? And there's a whole bunch of steps beyond just the clerk telling you that the commission can put something on the ballot or citizens can, but there is a whole bunch of other things that go along with that. And I was hoping that if the clerk mentioned that to you, he would tell you that as well. And with that, we're adjourned.